The streets of Dodge City should have been deserted that morning in July, at 6:30, just 8 minutes after the first rays of the sun started bouncing off the windows of Charlie Rath's general store. But on this particular summer day in 1876, there were more than 100 spectators lining both sides of the street. It was far too early in the morning for the patrons of the Long Branch Saloon to be awake. And they wouldn't be, except that most of them were there because they had been up all night. The temperature was a comfortable 70 degrees, perfect for a gunfight, and some 30 degrees cooler than it would be 5 or 6 hours later, when the survivor of the shootout would be downing a bucket of beer in the Long Branch Saloon. And the loser would likely be reclining on a slab in Percy Canner's carpentry and undertaking shop. There wasn't much doubt about who was going to win. Gamblers set the odds at 40-1 against the foreigner. Everybody knew that the Englishman didn't stand a chance against Whip Blander. Blander's pistol had 5 notches on it, and that was on his new gun. He retired the old 6-shooter when he ran out of room to cut any more notches on it. Some people said that Blander had gunned down 27 men. Others said it was more like 127. The Englishman didn't even have a 6-shooter. His weapon was an old, single-shot black powder cap-and ball pistol that was issued to members of the British Army in the 1850s.
Welcome to Short Story Theatre. Today's episode, written and directed by Bill Russo, is titled The Dude and the Gunfighter. Set in Dodge City, in the 1870s, it is the tale of an Englishman who arrives in Kansas and claims he wants to write a series of articles for his newspaper in London. But soon, it seems as though he's got something else on his mind. Here's Deputy Sheriff Chalky Jones with further details.
After I walked 1,500 miles to get to Dodge City from Lone Pine, California, Sheriff Bassett arrested me for vagrancy. After I spent my first night in jail, the sheriff said the only way I could get out was if I had a job. Then he offered me a job swamping out the cells, the outbuildings, and the town hall. I took it, and soon Mr. Bassett, who was the first sheriff of Dodge, made me the town's first deputy. Mr. Bassett was also the owner of the Long Branch, and he spent as much time in his saloon as he did in the sheriff's office. That generally worked out well, because if trouble was going to break out in Dodge City, it usually started right there in the Long Branch Saloon. And so it was, with the Englishman and the deadly gunfighter Whip Blander. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me back up to late June. With the arrival of the morning stage from Hays City, there were 6 passengers. 2 of them were farmers' wives who had been visiting friends and relations in Hays. 3 others were businessmen, one a drummer who sold whiskey and beer, and the other 2 were cattle buyers. The 6th person, who got out last, looked like some kind of an exhibition in a museum. He was wearing clothes that people in Dodge City had only seen in newspapers or storybooks. He had a top hat that looked like a stovepipe. It was made of beaver and shined like a hot skillet full of butter. Despite the warmth of the season, he was wearing a heavy, double-breasted frock coat with long sleeves, and it trailed down past his knees almost down to his boots. His hands were covered by brown, leather gloves, one of which held an elegant walking stick with a knob that resembled an enormous, shiny pearl. His other hand gripped a bulky leather briefcase. A long, thick beard and mustache, the color of night, largely concealed most of his face.
Well, Chalky, I'd like to know what that dude is planning on doing in Dodge City. But I got to talk with that drummer. I want to be the first businessman to check out what he's got. Things are in short supply this far west. So I want the first chance at whatever he's got. While I'm talking to him, why don't you mosey on over and chat with that dude? Find out what he's up to.
Howdy there, stranger. I'm Chalky Jones, deputy to Mr. Charlie Bassett the Sheriff. Welcome to Dodge City.
Thank you, Chalky. It is a pleasure to meet you. I am Barclay Addison of London, England. I expect that you are wondering why I have come to Dodge.
We've never had a visitor from England before.
Yes, Chalky, I am a writer and one of the owners of a newspaper in London. We've never had the true story of what happens in the American West. We hear about gunfights and people being slaughtered by Indians, and from the way things sound, every day there's blood on the streets. So I am here to find out what really happens in your Wild West, and from what I have heard, Dodge City is one of the wildest places in the colonies.
The colonies? What are the colonies, sir?
Well, Chalky, that's what we in London call your country. Up until a fairly short time ago, the colonies were part of England. Didn't you know that?
I've never been to school, Mr. Addison. Before she died, my ma taught me reading and writing, but I don't know much about history.
Ah, my new friend, if you show me around Dodge City, I will be happy to share a little bit of history with you. Now about the violence. How many gunfights will there be today?
Probably none. We do have some problems now and then. But most of the trouble usually takes place in one of the saloons late at night. Generally, one cowpoke takes a swing at another. Most times that's all it is. But when gunfighters come to town, things can get deadly real fast.
Are there any gunfighters here now?
No. None right now. But usually every summer a couple come here. Sometimes they are on the run from the law and Mr. Bassett has to go up against them. Sometimes there will be two guys in a draw fight. And in almost all cases, that ends up being deadly for one of them.
Do they put up a fight when the sheriff tries to arrest them?
Arrest them? What do you mean?
I mean, after a gunfighter kills a man, isn't he put in jail?
No, Mr. Addison. Not if it was a draw fight. If both men are armed, there's no charges brought, even if one of them ends up dead.
In my country, we call that kind of a shootout a duel. But sadly, in England dueling has been outlawed for more than 40 years. The last fatal duel in London was in 1845. Most people in England would be surprised to learn that here in the colonies it is still legal.
I gave Mr. Addison a quick tour of the city, starting with Charlie Rath's general store, then the sheriff's office, the hotels and eating places, and finally the Lawn Branch Saloon.
I've always heard that Dodge City is a bustling community and something's always going on. But Chalky, there's only a half a dozen people in here and they look like farmers. Not gunfighters.
That's what they are. Farmers. They probably just got through buying supplies from Charlie Rath. They're having a beer or two before heading back to their homesteads. The cowboys will start arriving near sundown, after their day's work. The Long Branch will be filled up by the time the moon comes out.
And what about the bar girls? I don't see a single one. I'm told that every saloon in Dodge hires girls who keep company with the customers.
They wouldn't make any money by hanging around during the day, Mr. Addison. The farmers have wives, and they are not looking for company. The ladies will be here when the cowpunchers arrive.
Chalky went back to the jail and began his daily routine of sweeping out the office, and taking care of the cells by changing the sheets and pillowcases, if they needed changing. Mr. Bassett prided himself of having neat and clean cells. He didn't want any insects or mice in his jail. He told Chalky the only critters he wants in his jail are the two-legged ones that he arrests. Meanwhile, Mr. Addison took a room at Sutler's Hotel, owned by Henry Sutler, the man who founded the town. In 1871 he built the first house in what would become Dodge City, and he expanded the property as the town grew, and it became the biggest and finest hotel in the city by 1875. After booking his room, the English newspaperman headed for Charlie Rath's general store. There were 19 saloons in Dodge, 6 feed and seed stores, and 3 stables, but only one general merchandise store, Charlie Rath's Mercantile. Charlie's brother started the store, but when he took sick a few years ago, Charlie left his own store in a town called Effingham in New Hampshire and traveled more than 1,700 miles on the tracks of half a dozen railroad companies on a cobbled-together route. That took 20 days. Charlie also shipped the entire stock of his New Hampshire store so that when he arrived in Dodge, he doubled the inventory. And his business was so successful, nobody else gave a thought to opening another general store in town. When Mr. Addison walked into the store, he was the only customer.
Howdy, Bob. Welcome to the store. Yeah, my name's Charlie Rath, You're new in town, ain't ya? I figured that out by your clothing. What can I get for ya?
I'm not sure yet, Mr. Rath. My name is Bartley Anderson. I am from London. I am one of the owners of the London Star, a daily newspaper. I have come to the colonies to write a series of articles about the Wild West. My studies led me to believe that Dodge is about as wild as it gets, but so far it looks pretty tame.
Well, sir, it's always tame here in Dodge City, till it ain't. You see, Dodge is a small town. We only got 1,200 full-time residents here. But thousands of cowpokes drift in from hundreds of cattle drives. Dodge is a stopping point, don't you know, for hundreds of wagon trains that come through on their way towards the north bank of the Arkansas River, on the way to Colorado, or on to California. Sometimes at the end of summer, you can see stacks of buffalo hides taller than Sutler's Hotel, lining both sides of Front Street. Hundreds of thousands of buffalo hides are shipped out here. And now longhorn cattle are becoming even more important than the buffaloes. Hundreds of thousands of cattle are being driven up to Dodge along the Texas Trail, don't you know? So, like I said, Dodge is a real quiet town. Till it ain't. You stick around a while, mister. You'll see just about anything.
I'm hoping to see a gunfighter, Mr. Rath. I want to write a story about a gunfight. My readers will be fascinated by real-life Western tales. I want to know what goes through the minds of the gunfighters as they prepare to shoot each other. I brought some writing supplies with me, but I could use a couple dozen pens and a ream of paper. I'll be back later to pick up those items. I'm going to the sheriff's office now and see if I can get an interview with Sheriff Bassett. Since it's not dark yet and the Long Branch is not busy now, Mr. Bassett will probably be at the sheriff's office. I don't much like riding horses, so I'm glad that the jailhouse is just a short walk from the general store. Ah. There it is. I'll just knock on the door and see if Charlie Bassett is in the office.
Come on in, it ain't locked.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bassett. My name is Bartley Addison. I am a newspaper writer from London. I have come here to do some articles for my paper about the Wild West. But so far, it isn't very wild.
Well, sir, I expect that's 'cause you just arrived. We mostly reserve our wildness for Saturday nights. Folks have to work their ranches and farms during the week, so Saturday's the only chance they get to hoorah. But that's pretty tame. The skinners and the hunters, they only come to town once a month or so. They look wild, and they smell worse than the buffalo. But they don't make much of a fuss. When the cowpunchers come, when they bring the herds in town, that's when Dodge gets very loud, but it still isn't that wild. I'm afraid you're in for a big disappointment, Mr. Addison. The Wild West ain't half as wild as you British folks think it is.
Sheriff Bassett, I don't think you are being entirely honest with me. All the stories I have heard cannot be fabrications. What about the gunfights?
Yep, you're right. Probably 20, 30 times a year somebody's killed in a gunfight here in Dodge. But it's usually the result of a dispute at the poker table or the faro game. Other times it's a fight over one of the saloon gals. If you're looking to see a draw fight between two gunslingers, go back home. You ain't gonna see it. Ain't gonna happen.
What do you mean? I hear that it happens all the time. Two fast draw artists meet at dawn, and only one of them survives.
That there is storybook stuff, Mr. Addison. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about a shooter who has a fast gun. A gunfighter almost never goes up against another fast draw artist. Most of the notches carved into gunslingers' weapons are after they kill some poor farmer whose only experience with guns is using a rifle or a shotgun for hunting. Listen, gunslingers will go to great lengths to avoid a fight with another fast gun. No, it's not that they're cowards. It's self-preservation. Life is a lot easier for them if they only have to deal with sodbusters and drunks. And that's how most of the fast draw artists build up their reputation, by gunning down people they know they can beat.
Sheriff, I've come thousands of miles from London across the sea on a rickety boat to get to Boston. And from Massachusetts, I had to spend almost 3 weeks in a series of belching trains, chugging some 1,700 miles to get to Dodge. And I'm not leaving until I get to see an authentic Western gunfighter.
Well, you can see one. He just rode into town this morning. He's sound asleep right now in his hotel room. His name is Whip Blander. His real name is Alexander, but they call him Whip, like the lash of a whip. People say he's just as fast as a whiplash. They also say he's cut 27 notches in his 6-gun. But I'll guarantee you not one of those notches was in a fair fight. The men he killed had no chance against him. He'll be in the Long Branch tonight. If you come in about 8 o'clock, you get a chance to talk to him.
Thanks for the information. I will be there, and I think I can guarantee you that there will be a gunfight here in Dodge City within 2 days. And one of the shooters will be Mr. Whip Blander.
And just as he said he would, the Englishman walked into the Long Branch that night looking for Whip Blander.
Hey fellas, look what just came through the swinging doors into the Long Branch. It's a real live dude. Take a gander at that stovepipe hat.
Hey dude, are y'all lost? Are y'all looking for the Undertaker's shop?
No, gentlemen. I am Bartley Addison of the London Record. That is a newspaper. And I am here to write a story about the famous gunfighter, Whip Blander. Is he here?
I'm Whip Blander, and I'm just about to sit down at a table with one of the ladies. What do y'all want with me?
I have come all the way from London, sir. For money. But not to take it. To give it. To you. Are you interested?
Well, dude, some people do say that my gun is for sale. But nobody ever said it was cheap. How much money are we talking?
2,000 American dollars, Mr. Blander. 2,000 brand new, crisp and clean American dollars. They're on deposit right now at the Dodge City Bank. And I have a withdrawal slip with your name on it.
Well, I think my young lady will have to wait. Let's go over to a table where it is more private and talk about this. Okay, dude. What's this all about? Who do you want to kill?
Myself, I guess. I came to the colonies to write about gunfighters, but from all accounts, real gunfights here are nowhere near as common as we in England have been led to believe. So I'm writing a story about you, a famous gunman with dozens of notches on your weapons. You need an opponent, and I am willing to go up against you, although I have never once in my life used a 6-gun.
So you want to face me in a draw fight, and I get $2,000 for it?
Exactly.
Well, mister, you look like you're barely tall enough to stand up at the bar, and I expect you don't weigh much more than a bag of sugar. So I don't think you're much of a threat. I'll take the $2,000. When do you want to get shot?
Not tomorrow morning. Let's make the gunfight at dawn of the following day. That will give me a chance to write up the story and get the word out, so that we will have a big crowd for the gunfight. Oh, there's just one more thing. I want it to be like a duel. In England, we outlawed duels decades ago. But in America, if both men are armed, they can have a duel. So, I would like us to use dueling pistols. I have 2 of them in my briefcase. Let me show you. There they are. A fine pair of cap-and-ball pistols, issued to British Army regulars in the 1850s. I'll put one on the table for you to examine.
It sure is funny looking. What kind of a gun is it?
It is a black powder cap-and-ball pistol. It fires only 1 shot. So, here's how it goes. In the middle of the street, we face each other, each of us with a black powder gun in hand, standing 1 foot apart. We shake hands, then we turn around and walk 30 paces with pistol in hand. Then, we turn around once more and face each other. Then we each raise our arm, with gun at the ready. We take aim and fire.
I've never shot one of these before. I don't like it.
I realize that. And I will spend all afternoon tomorrow helping you to practice with the pistol. By sunset you will be able to hit the eye of a gnat at 30 paces. If you don't feel confident with the weapon you can call off the duel. But if you agree to it, the deposit slip, signed over to you, will be in my pocket. After you kill me, just take the slip over to the bank and draw out the cash. You can go over to the bank with me tomorrow and I will explain to the bank manager then you will be withdrawing the $2,000, sometime in the morning, on the day after tomorrow.
Okay, I'll do it. But first thing tomorrow morning, I want to go to the bank with you to make sure the money is in there, and secondly, I have to be satisfied that this black powder gun will work and can be aimed and fired accurately.
True to his word, the Englishman, Mr. Barclay Addison, spent 2 hours the next afternoon tutoring the gunfighter, Whip Blander, on the use of the black powder cap-and-ball pistol. They went to a field at the edge of town. Addison lined up a row of tin cans on the rear of an abandoned corral. Blander had the eye of an eagle, and in no time, from 30 paces he was able to hit the cans dead center, every single time. Blander felt certain that the so-called duel would go his way. The Englishman spent most of the rest of the day promoting the gunfight that he was calling the Duel at Dawn. He even had handbills printed up, and he paid a down on his luck sodbuster, $5 to tack them up on signboards all around the city. He woke up at 5 the next morning, the day of the gunfight, and walked out onto Front Street, where he was happy to see an eager crowd waiting for the duel. The streets would usually be empty at 6:30, just 8 minutes after the first rays of the sun started bouncing off the windows of Charlie Rath's general store. but there were more than 100 spectators lining both sides of Front Street. It was far too early for the patrons of the saloons to be awake, and they wouldn't be, except that most of them were there because they had been up all night, drinking in the Long Branch or one of the other saloons till 3 in the morning, and then standing outside in the dark. Just waiting. Waiting for dawn. Besides the crowd on the street, there were hundreds more people peering out of their windows, and dozens of shopkeepers and tradesmen eagerly watching as they began to get ready to open for business, which would be brisk after the duel. The temperature was a comfortable 70 degrees, perfect for a gunfight, and some 30 degrees cooler than it would be 5 or 6 hours later when the survivor of the shootout would be downing a bucket of beer in the Long Branch saloon. And the loser would likely be reclining on a slab in Percy Canner's carpentry and undertaking shop. Everybody knew that the Englishman didn't have a chance against Whip Blander. Gamblers set the odds at 40-1 in favor of the gunman. Members of the Ladies' Aid Society asked Sheriff Bassett to stop the gunfight, but Charlie Bassett explained to them that the duel was pretty much like any other gunfight. If they are both armed, it is not against the law. The sheriff even agreed, at the request of the Englishman, to preside over the battle. Mr. Bassett was first to arrive on Front Street. He found a shaded spot in front of the Long Branch where the duel could be fought, without the sun being in either man's eyes. Soon after, Whip Blander walked slowly but confidently up to the sheriff and showed Mr. Bassett that he was not wearing his 6 gun and his only weapon was the black powder, cap and ball pistol. Atop his head was a brand new Stetson hat that he bought yesterday from Charlie Rath. It was as black and as shiny as the Englishman's stovepipe hat. Blander's shirt was also shiny black, around his neck was a snow-white bandana. A moment later, Barclay Anderson marched onto Main Street. He strode confidently from the hotel to the dueling place in front of the Long Branch. His long stovepipe hat bobbed up and down as he walked, and a smattering of laughter spread through the crowd on the sides of the street. His long black frock coat and stiff white shirt and vest made him look more like a preacher than a man with a gun. But he did have a gun, and he told Sheriff Bassett that he knew how to use it. The sheriff said, "We'll see about that in a minute." The crowd chuckled, and then the sheriff told everyone to quiet down while he went over the rules.
Gentlemen, the rules are simple. You face each other standing 1 foot apart. You shake hands. Then you turn around and you walk 30 paces. You wait until you hear me shout, "Now!" As soon as I call out "now," you turn around again and you fire your weapon. Good luck to both of you. All right, shake hands. Turn around, walk 30 paces, and then stop. Don't do anything until I shout "now." Now.
The Englishman has been hit. He's staggering backwards. Whip Blander turned around and raised his arm and fired with blinding speed, and hit his mark. But the Englishman is not falling. He is raising his arm and getting ready to fire. It's hard to believe, but Whip Blander fired first and only slightly wounded Mr. Addison. The Englishman staggered for a few seconds, then took careful, deadly aim and fired. His shot was perfect, right through the heart. The gunfighter bled out within seconds. A photographer who had been standing by quickly took pictures of the fallen gunman and of the victorious Englishman, Barclay Addison. Addison walked over to Sheriff Bassett and handed him an envelope stuffed with cash. He told Charlie Bassett the money was to cover Blander's funeral expenses and to buy him a grave marker. Then the Englishman went back to his hotel room and removed the heavy frock coat. There was a small hole in it, right at the spot that covered his heart. He hung up the coat and then removed his shiny white silk vest. A very unique vest. Made from 4 specially woven layers of silk. Invented by an engineer in Poland, and unknown in the United States, the vest was 100% effective against black powder weapons. Against the more modern Colt 45, it might, or might not, be strong enough to save a life. But it was more than enough to save the life of the English newspaperman, Barclay Addison. He took the next stage out of Dodge, heading to the nearest town along the railroad line, where he will begin writing his stories of the great Dodge gunfight, eliminating, of course, the part about the bulletproof vest.
You've been listening to Dodge City, The Duel at Dawn. This has been a presentation of short story theater, written, directed, and produced by Bill Russo. The Short Story Theater podcast is hosted by Spreaker. That's like speaker with an R after the SP. Spreaker. Our dramatized tales are available on all podcast sites from Apple to Zebra and everything in between. Many are also dramatized on video and can be viewed on YouTube. Thanks for being with us, and come back again real soon. Won't you?